Ladies and gentlemen, President Trump just issued a direct takedown of the Chinese Communist Party's anti American antics. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I have a feeling that you're all going to particularly enjoy today's video. You see, for years now, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, has been doing every single thing they can to gather American intelligence. They've tried to infiltrate our federal government. They've tried to infiltrate our university systems, and honestly, in large part, they've been very successful in doing so. It seems like a weekly occurrence now that some Chinese spy gets caught somewhere in the country, and really, the problem has only been getting worse. But so, let me tell you all why this is such a big problem. You see, China has a piece of legislation called the National Intelligence Law of 2017, which just plainly states, all organizations and citizens shall support, assist, and cooperate with national intelligence efforts in accordance with the law and shall protect national intelligence work secrets they are aware of. And so what this means is that quite literally every single Chinese citizen, students included, inside of the United States is effectively an intelligence asset of the CCP. Seriously, if a Chinese citizen is asked for information by the CCP and they refuse to comply, they can get imprisoned, fined, blacklisted, and the CCP can even target their family members as well. It's easy to forget that not every country around the world has the same appreciation for free speech that we have here in the United States. But here's the scary thing about China. Not only do they not have free speech, but instead, they have compelled speech. Because like I said, if the CCP asks a Chinese citizen a question and they don't give an answer, they are done. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this is what brings us to today's breaking news. But before we get to that, I do want to say real quick that if you guys enjoy the daily news updates, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. But okay, check this out. Yesterday evening, Secretary of State Marco Rubio issued a bombshell message which said, the U.S. will begin revoking visas of Chinese students, including those with connections to the Chinese Communist Party or studying in critical fields. And so, folks, like I said, this is absolutely massive. Right this very moment, there are over 280,000 Chinese students attending universities here in the United States, and as we discussed earlier, per the Chinese legislation, every single Chinese student in the country is effectively a CCP intelligence asset. But so to really highlight just how big of an issue all of this really is, take a look at this.
And this should shock no one. So the report came out, it said right now in the United States of America, at one of our universities, there is an organized, orchestrated spy ring. To put this in perspective, when I got here, I said, when I was told that there was a Chinese law in place that required Chinese nationals, including students that come to the United States on visas, and by the way, we take 300,000 Chinese students a year into our universities, there's a law in the books that says they have to provide intelligence gathering and information to the CCP. We also had information in Congress before I even got here that they were setting up these programs to organize spies and push them into our universities using visas. And when I got here and realized that there was no law stopping the visa program, even though we had that information, I immediately launched a bill that would end visas for Chinese students. Now, nothing against Chinese students that want to learn, but if you have a government that is enlisting them, and not just enlisting them, requiring them by law under penalty to be espionage agents when they get here, we cannot keep inviting them into our nation. And so, time after time over the last few years, we have found Chinese students with drones, cameras on our military bases, stealing information at our universities, and nothing has been done. So when this report came out 2 days ago, I was not surprised because we launched this bill and we've been advocating and trying to get someone's attention that there were spy rings here right now. Now, hopefully, we will see some action not only by the university that's been informed of this, where their students saying it's happening, but by the government to do an investigation.
And so, folks, that investigation has happened, which means now President Trump is doing something about it. The Trump administration's visa revocation policy targets Chinese students linked to the CCP, literally all of them, by the way, which not only safeguards United States national security, but it also prevents the CCP from stealing some of America's most valuable intellectual capital. For decades now, not only has China been trying to subvert the American economy through predatory trade deals, but they've also been actively trying to steal United States intellectual property and undermine American technological dominance. And so the reality is, allowing Chinese nationals into our Ivy League academic system, or even worse, into positions within our federal government that have access to sensitive information, is not only incredibly stupid, it's also a serious national security risk. And so this is why, on top of the student visa revocations that we've been talking about, Secretary of State Marco Rubio also issued this veiled threat to China. Take a look. For too long, Americans have been fined, harassed, and even charged by foreign authorities for exercising their free speech rights. Today, I am announcing a new visa restriction policy that will apply to foreign officials and persons who are complicit in censoring Americans. Free speech is essential to the American way of life, a birthright over which foreign governments have no authority. Foreigners who work to undermine the rights of Americans should not enjoy the privilege of traveling to our country. Whether Latin America, Europe, or elsewhere, the days of passive treatment for those who work to undermine the rights of Americans are over. And so obviously, he didn't directly mention China by name in that post, but let's be honest here, which country is the single largest silencer of people's right to free speech? Yeah, China. And so, what this crackdown on Chinese visas does is send a very clear message to China. Now that President Trump is back in the White House, the United States is done tolerating Chinese espionage and intellectual property theft. The days during which tens of thousands of Chinese spies get to roam freely throughout the United States are over, and really, this is a very long overdue response to the decades of Chinese infiltration. Americans across the country have overwhelmingly voted to put an end to all of this anti-American nonsense, which is why we just elected President Trump. Finally, the adults are back in the White House, which means it's time to start putting America first. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we wrap up, I do want to say real quick that we officially have a Morse News Twitter page as well as a Morse News Facebook page. So if you use either of those platforms, please go down below and drop a follow in order to get breaking news updates that relate to everything we talk about here in the YouTube videos. But everyone, that is going to be a wrap for today's video, so please go down below and drop a comment. Let me know what you think about all of this. Please like the video while you're down there, and like I said earlier, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. Thank you all very much for tuning in today, and of course, as always, stay safe.